poor girl, filled with pity, helped a blind millionaire all his life. And what did she do? Harrison Reed lived surrounded by everything money could buy, except the one thing no fortune seemed able to reach: light. Blind since birth, he had never known colors, shapes, or the contours of the world, yet he had built a technology empire focused on assistive devices that transformed the lives of thousands of people with disabilities. He was admired for his genius and resilience, but within his meticulously organized routine, there existed a void that time and awards had never managed to fill. In Miami, from the top of his penthouse in Brickell, the sound of rain and cars seemed even more distant than usual that March afternoon. After an exhausting meeting with his team, Harrison declined the ride and headed down to the street alone. For the first time in years, he left his sensor-equipped cane in the office. He wanted to feel human, vulnerable. The humid wind of the city seemed to carry something different that day. Guiding himself by the sound of rain and the vibrations on the ground, he walked toward the boundary between the luxurious neighborhood and the Port District. And it was there, in the urban chaos he could not see but knew through other senses, that Harrison's life began to change. A vehicle braked abruptly. The noise tore through the air and paralyzed him. Before he could react, he felt a small hand grasp his firmly and pull him toward the sidewalk. It was a child's hand, dry, fragile, yet determined. Without a word, the child led him through wet streets and uneven sidewalks. After minutes of silence, they arrived at a calmer place where the smell of wet earth mixed with flowers and wax. Under a makeshift shelter, the sound of a match being struck filled the space, followed by an unmistakable scent: burning candle. It was at that instant that the inexplicable happened. A point of light, small, trembling but real, emerged in his visual consciousness, a region of his brain that until then had never been activated. Harrison trembled. It made no sense. It was impossible. The light lasted only a few seconds before disappearing just as quickly. When he tried to ask something, he realized the child had vanished. He felt only the echo of a presence that shook him from within. Harrison Reed had always been a man of absolutes. In his world there were problems and solutions, obstacles and innovations. Everything could be measured, calculated, improved. He had turned that philosophy into an empire worth $200 million, all built on the premise that technology could overcome any human limitation. Reed Tech Industries dominated the assistive technology market across North America, producing everything from advanced screen readers to bionic limbs controlled by neural interfaces. His products were in hospitals, schools, and homes, from Seattle to Miami, from Boston to San Diego. They called him a visionary, a pioneer, the man who gave independence back to those society had forgotten. But Harrison himself remained trapped in a darkness. No invention of his could pierce. He was 42 years old and had never seen a sunrise, never watched the expression on someone's face change from joy to sadness, never witnessed the simple miracle of light dancing on water. His parents had taken him to every specialist imaginable when he was a child, from Boston to Switzerland, from experimental procedures to faith healers his desperate mother had found through late-night infomercials. Nothing worked. His optic nerves were simply not there, not in any functional sense. The pathways that should have connected his eyes to his brain were absent, incomplete, dormant. The doctors used words like congenital, irreversible, permanent. By the time he was 10, everyone had accepted the reality. Harrison would never see. So he learned to navigate the world differently. He mastered echolocation before he was 12, using subtle clicks of his tongue to map spaces around him with startling accuracy. He learned to read micro-expressions through touch, to sense mood shifts through changes in breathing patterns and body heat. He could identify people by their footsteps, tell the time of day by the quality of ambient noise, navigate entire city blocks using nothing but memory and auditory landmarks. He became so proficient at existing in darkness that most people forgot he was blind within minutes of meeting him. His penthouse in Brickell reflected that mastery. Every surface was exactly where he expected it to be. Every object had its designated place, marked by subtle tactile cues he had designed himself. The furniture was arranged for optimal acoustic feedback. The temperature control system responded to voice commands calibrated to his exact preferences. The entire space was a testament to control, to the idea that even blindness could be overcome through discipline and innovation. But lately, something had begun to crack in that carefully constructed world. It started small, almost imperceptible. A restlessness during board meetings, a sense that the presentations and quarterly reports that once energized him now felt hollow. His assistant, Margaret, a sharp woman in her 50s, who had been with him since the company's early days, noticed first. She found him one afternoon standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, his hand pressed against the glass, his face turned toward the sun he could not see. "Do you need anything, Harrison?" she asked. He did not answer right away. The question felt too large, too complicated. What did he need? More success? Another innovation? Another cover story in Forbes or Wired magazine celebrating his brilliance? None of that seemed to matter anymore. "I don't know," he finally said. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise of the air conditioning and the distant hum of traffic 40 stories below. "I think I'm tired, Margaret." "You work too hard," she said gently. "You always have. Maybe you should take some time off. Go somewhere. The house in the Keys has been sitting empty for months." He shook his head. It wasn't that kind of tired. It was deeper, existential. It was the weariness of a man who had spent his entire life compensating for an absence, only to realize that no amount of compensation could fill the void at the center of everything. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, the feeling had only intensified. He found himself making small rebellions against his own routines, skipping meals, dismissing his driver, walking routes he had not walked in years. It was as if some part of him was trying to break free from the prison of predictability he had built around himself, which was why on that rainy March afternoon, after a particularly tedious meeting about the next generation of cochlear implants, he made a decision that would change everything. He told his driver to go home. He left his smart cane, the one equipped with sonar sensors and GPS tracking, leaning against his desk. He walked to the elevator in just his suit jacket, no umbrella, no protection, nothing but his own senses and whatever courage he could summon. Margaret caught him at the elevator. "Harrison, what are you doing? Going for a walk?" he said simply. Her concern was palpable even without seeing her face. He could hear it in the slight catch of her breath, the way her weight shifted nervously from foot to foot. "In this weather? Without your cane?" "I'll be fine," he said, stepping into the elevator. The doors closed before she could argue further. The lobby of the ReedTech building was busy with employees leaving for the day, their voices bouncing off marble floors and glass walls in a familiar symphony of departure. Harrison navigated through them easily, his internal map of the space as precise as any GPS. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the humid Miami afternoon. The rain was light but persistent, the kind that soaked through clothes slowly but thoroughly. He could feel it immediately on his face, his hair, seeping through the fabric of his expensive suit. The sidewalk beneath his feet was slick, puddles forming in uneven sections of concrete. Around him, the city moved in its usual chaotic rhythm. Car horns, conversations in English and Spanish, the metallic screech of a bus stopping at the corner. The smell of street food from a vendor cart, mixing with exhaust fumes and salt air from the nearby bay. He walked south, away from the pristine towers of Brickell toward the older, grittier sections near the port. This was not his usual territory. His life existed in carefully curated spaces, places designed for efficiency and accessibility. But today he wanted mess. He wanted unpredictability. He wanted to feel something other than the numbing control that defined every other aspect of his existence. The neighborhoods changed as he walked. The voices around him shifted, more Spanish, more Creole. The buildings felt closer, older. The sidewalks became more treacherous, broken concrete and unexpected obstacles. He stumbled twice, catching himself both times, feeling a strange satisfaction in the near falls. This was real. This was human. He had been walking for maybe 20 minutes when he reached an intersection he did not recognize. The sounds were different here, more industrial. The smell of diesel was stronger. He could hear the groan of machinery in the distance, probably the port cranes loading and unloading cargo ships. He paused, trying to orient himself, when he heard the vehicle. It came fast, too fast for the narrow street. He heard the engine revving, the tires squealing as they fought for traction on wet pavement. Harrison froze, his instinct telling him he was too close to the curb, maybe even stepping off it. The sound grew louder, closer, and for a brief moment he felt genuine fear. Then the hand grabbed him. It was small, impossibly small, and it seized his wrist with surprising strength and yanked him backward. He stumbled, his heel catching on the curb, but the hand steadied him, pulling him firmly onto the sidewalk, just as the vehicle roared past, close enough that he felt the displacement of air against his face. His heart hammered in his chest. He stood there gasping, rain streaming down his face, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had saved him. A child had saved him. He turned toward where he sensed the small figure standing. "Are you okay?" he managed to say, his voice shaky. "Thank you. You just saved my life." There was no response. He waited, listening intently. The child was still there. He could feel the presence, hear the soft sound of breathing. But no words came. "What's your name?" Harrison asked, his voice gentler now. "Where are your parents?" Still nothing. He reached out carefully, his hand, extended in a gesture of gratitude. The child took his hand again, and this time he noticed more details. The hand was dry despite the rain, small and thin, the fingers delicate but strong. The child could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old based on the size. Without warning, the child began to walk, pulling Harrison along. He followed, unsure what else to do. There was something compelling about the silence, about the determination in that small grip. The child led him through a series of turns, down streets that felt increasingly narrow and empty. The sounds of traffic faded, replaced by the patter of rain on metal roofs and the distant bark of a dog. They walked for several minutes, Harrison completely disoriented now, his mental map useless in this unfamiliar territory. Finally, they stopped. The rain was lighter here, partially blocked by something overhead. Harrison could smell flowers, strong and sweet, mixed with earth and something else, something waxy. The child released his hand. Harrison stood still, listening, trying to understand where he was. The space felt enclosed, intimate. He could hear the rain hitting a roof or awning above them, the ground beneath. His feet was no longer concrete but something softer, maybe dirt or grass. Then he heard it, the scrape of a match against a striker, the tiny flare of ignition, and then the smell. Burning wax. A candle. And then, impossible as it was, Harrison saw light. It was not vision, not in any conventional sense. It was more like an impression, a sensation, a sudden awareness in a part of his mind that had been dormant his entire life. There was a point of brightness in the darkness, small and flickering, but unmistakably there. It had color, though he had no reference for what color meant. It had warmth, not physical warmth, but visual warmth, a quality he could not name but somehow recognized. Harrison gasped. His entire body went rigid. The sensation lasted perhaps 5 seconds, maybe less, and then it was gone, snuffed out as quickly as it had appeared. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "What did you just do?" He reached out, searching for the child, but his hands found nothing. The small presence was gone. He was alone in the rain in an unknown place with the lingering scent of candle smoke and flowers, and the impossible memory of light. Harrison stood there for a long time, his mind racing. It was not possible. Light required functioning optic nerves, a visual cortex capable of processing photons into images. He had neither. Every doctor he had ever seen had confirmed it. And yet, something had happened, something undeniable. He eventually made his way back to familiar territory, using his phone's GPS and voice navigation, arriving at his penthouse soaked and exhausted. Margaret met him at the door, frantic with worry, but he waved off her concerns and retreated to his bedroom. That night he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that point of light again, felt that impossible sensation of visual awareness. By morning, he had convinced himself it was a hallucination, some kind of stress-induced neural misfire. But deep down, he knew better. Something real had happened in that unknown place with that silent child. Over the next few days, the memory haunted him. He went through the motions at work, attended meetings, reviewed product prototypes, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept touching his eyes as if expecting them to suddenly function. He found himself researching neuroplasticity, spontaneous nerve regeneration, cases of adult blindness reversal. The scientific literature offered no hope. What he had experienced was impossible. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, he called his doctor. Dr. Patricia Huang had been Harrison's neurologist for 15 years. She was one of the leading experts in visual neuroscience, a professor at the University of Miami's medical school, and the only doctor who had ever spoken to him with complete honesty about his condition. He sat in her office on a Friday afternoon, rain once again drumming against the windows. Miami, in March, was always like this, wet and unpredictable. "Harrison, what's going on?" Dr. Huang asked. "Margaret said you insisted on seeing me immediately. Is something wrong?" He hesitated, suddenly aware of how absurd his story would sound. "I think I saw something," he said finally. There was a long pause. "Saw something?" she repeated carefully. "What do you mean?" He told her everything. The walk in the rain, the child, the candle, the flash of light in his consciousness. He spoke quickly, half expecting her to interrupt with rational explanations, but she remained silent until he finished. "I want to run." "Some tests," she said when he was done. Her voice was neutral, professional, but he detected something else underneath. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. The tests took 3 hours. Functional MRI scans, electroretinography, visual evoked potential measurements, things Harrison had done dozens of times before, always with the same results. No activity, no response, no hope. But this time was different. Dr. Huang called him back into her office late that evening. Her usual composed demeanor was fractured. She sounded uncertain, confused even. "Harrison, I don't know how to explain this," she began. "Your optic nerve is showing activity. It's minimal, barely detectable, but it's there. That shouldn't be possible. Your nerve structure hasn't changed. There's no physical reason for this." "So I didn't imagine it," he said. "No," she confirmed. "Something happened. I just can't tell you what or why. The activity is unstable. It appeared during the scan and then disappeared. If I hadn't been looking at the monitor in real time, I might have thought it was a calibration error." Harrison leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. "What does this mean?" "I don't know," Dr. Huang admitted. "There are cases of sudden, unexplained neurological changes, but nothing like this. Not in someone with your diagnosis, not after 42 years. Harrison, if this is real, if something genuinely triggered a response in your visual pathways, we need to understand what it was. Can you find that child again?" The question hung in the air between them. Could he? He did not even know where he had been. He had no name, no description beyond a small hand and profound silence. How did you find a ghost in a city of 500,000 people? But he knew he had to try because that moment of light, brief as it was, had shown him something he had never believed possible. Hope. Harrison left Dr. Huang's office with a sense of purpose he had not felt in months. The exhaustion, the existential weariness that had been consuming him, suddenly felt distant. He had a mission now. Find the child. Understand what had happened. Maybe, just maybe, find a way to see. He started the search that night. Using his phone and specialized mapping software, he tried to retrace his route from that rainy afternoon. It was difficult, disorienting even with technology to help him. The streets blurred, together in his memory, distinguished only by sounds and smells that were hard to pinpoint on a map. But he had resources most people did not. Money, connections, a company full of brilliant engineers. He called in favors. He had members of his team discreetly canvass the neighborhoods near the Port District, asking about children, especially those who might be homeless or unsupervised. He offered rewards for information, careful not to attract too much attention or alarm anyone. He reviewed city surveillance footage from the day in question, though he had to rely on his staff to describe what they saw. Nothing useful emerged. Days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. Harrison grew increasingly desperate. The memory of that light began to fade, becoming dreamlike, unreal. Maybe he had imagined it after all. Maybe Dr. Huang's findings were an anomaly. Maybe hope was just another cruel joke. Then on a Tuesday evening his phone rang. It was Sandra Torres, a social worker he had quietly contacted through one of Miami's larger homeless outreach organizations. He had explained his situation vaguely, saying he was looking for a child who had helped him and whom he wanted to thank. "Mr. Reed," Sandra said, her accent carrying the musical rhythm of her Cuban heritage, "I think I might have information about the child you're looking for." Harrison sat up straight in his office chair. "Tell me everything." "There's a girl," Sandra continued. "She was brought into one of our shelters in Little Haiti about 3 weeks ago. She's maybe 7 or 8 years old. No one knows her real name or where she came from. She doesn't speak, not a word. Some of the staff think she might be mute, others think it's trauma. But here's the thing, she's obsessed with candles. She tries to light them constantly. We've had to remove matches from the shelter because she keeps taking them." Harrison's pulse quickened. "Does she have a name?" "We've been calling her Lucy," Sandra said, "but we don't know if that's her real name. We just needed something to call her. Mr. Reed, this is a vulnerable child. If you want to see her, I need to understand why." "What happened between you two?" He explained again, more thoroughly this time. The near accident, the rescue, the candle. He left out the part about seeing light, knowing it would sound too strange. Sandra listened without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said finally, "I believe you. And honestly, Lucy could use a friend. She's been completely withdrawn since she arrived. She doesn't interact with the other kids. She just sits in corners drawing pictures and arranging things in patterns. It's heartbreaking. If you helped her somehow, or if she helped you, maybe seeing you again would be good for her." "When can I meet her?" Harrison asked. "Tomorrow," Sandra said. "Come to the shelter at 3. I'll make sure she's there." Harrison barely slept that night. He kept touching his eyes, wondering if he was about to chase a fantasy or discover something extraordinary. By the time his driver picked him up the next afternoon, his nerves were frayed. The shelter was in Little Haiti, a neighborhood Harrison rarely visited. It was a single-story building painted a cheerful yellow, surrounded by a small playground with worn equipment. Sandra met him at the entrance, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "She's in the activity room," Sandra said as she led him inside. "Mr. Reed, please understand. Lucy is fragile. Whatever happened to her before she came to us, it wasn't good. Be gentle." "I will," Harrison promised. The activity room was modest, filled with donated toys, art supplies, and books. Harrison could hear several children playing, their voices high and excited. But Sandra led him to a corner of the room where it was quieter. "Lucy," Sandra said softly, "there's someone here to see you. Do you remember him?" Harrison stood still, his heart pounding. He listened, trying to pick out the small sounds of a child's presence among all the ambient noise. Then he felt it, a small hand slipping into his. It was the same hand. He knew immediately. Dry. Delicate. Strong. "Hello?" Harrison said quietly. His voice caught slightly. "Do you remember me?" No response, but the hand tightened its grip. "I wanted to thank you," Harrison continued. "You saved my life that day. I've been looking for you ever since." He knelt down, bringing himself closer to the child's level. He could sense her now, small and silent, standing just inches away. He caught a faint scent of soap and something sweet, maybe candy. "Sandra told me you like candles," Harrison said. "Me too. They smell nice, don't they?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the small hand released his and he heard footsteps moving away. His heart sank. Had he frightened her? But then he heard the scrape of a match, the tiny flare of ignition, the smell of burning wax. And once again, impossible as it was, Harrison saw light. This time it was stronger, clearer. That point of brightness in the void, flickering but persistent. It had shape, dimension. He could sense it moving, dancing, alive. The sensation was overwhelming. His breath caught. Tears formed in his eyes, though he had never cried from visual stimulus before because he had never had visual stimulus. The light lasted longer this time, perhaps 15 seconds before fading away. When it was gone, Harrison remained kneeling, his entire body trembling. He heard Sandra gasp beside him. "Mr. Reed, are you okay?" He could not answer. He was too overwhelmed, but he felt the small hand return to his, and this time, it stayed. The connection between Harrison Reed and the silent child named Lucy became the center of his existence almost overnight. What had begun as a search for answers transformed into something deeper, something that defied the cold logic he had always relied upon. For the first time in his carefully controlled life, Harrison found himself driven not by innovation or achievement, but by something simpler and more profound: gratitude, wonder, and perhaps, though he would not admit it yet, love. The day after that second encounter at the shelter, Harrison met with his attorney. James Whitmore was a man in his 60s who had handled Harrison's legal affairs for nearly 2 decades. He sat across from Harrison in the Reed Tech conference room, his confusion evident even in the way he shuffled his papers. "Harrison, I want to make sure I understand what you're asking me," James said carefully. "You want to begin the process of becoming a foster parent?" Harrison nodded. "More than that. I want to explore every legal avenue to ensure Lucy has a permanent home. Foster care, guardianship, adoption if possible, whatever it takes." James was quiet for a moment. "Harrison, I've known you a long time. This is not like you. You've never expressed interest in children, in family. Now you're talking about taking in a little girl you met less than a week ago. A child with significant needs, trauma we don't fully understand, who doesn't even speak. Are you sure you've thought this through?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Harrison said firmly. James sighed. "Okay, then you need to understand what you're getting into. The state of Florida has very specific requirements for foster parents. You'll need background checks, home studies, training. You'll need to prove you can provide appropriate care for a special needs child. Your blindness might complicate things, though I don't think it should be disqualifying given your resources. But Harrison, this process takes time. Months, maybe longer." "I have time," Harrison said, "and I have resources. Whatever needs to happen, make it happen." James agreed, though his skepticism was clear. Over the following weeks, Harrison threw himself into the process with the same intensity he had once applied to building his company. He attended mandatory foster care training sessions, sitting through hours of lectures on child development, trauma-informed care, and behavioral management. He submitted to background checks and financial audits. He hired contractors to modify his penthouse, adding safety features and child-appropriate spaces that would satisfy the state's requirements. But more importantly, he spent time with Lucy. Sandra. Torres became his ally in this, allowing him to visit the shelter several times a week. At first, the visits were brief and awkward. Lucy would not speak, would barely acknowledge his presence beyond that initial hand-holding. She would sit in corners, drawing intricate patterns in notebooks, arranging toys in configurations that seemed meaningful only to her. But slowly, tentatively, she began to let Harrison into her world. He learned her patterns. Every time he visited, she would light a candle. And every time she did, Harrison would see that impossible point of light. The experience never diminished, never became routine. Each time felt like a miracle, a brief window into a realm he had never known existed. He began to understand that for Lucy, light was not just illumination. It was language. It was communication. It was her way of connecting with a world that had given her so few other means of expression. Dr. Patricia Huang continued to monitor Harrison's neurological changes. The activity in his optic nerve remained inconsistent, appearing only in Lucy's presence and vanishing when she was absent. Patricia assembled a small team of researchers, swearing them to confidentiality as they tried to understand what was happening. They theorized about electromagnetic fields, about pheromones, about quantum entanglement, and synchronized neural activity. None of it made sense. None of it fit the established science. "Your brain is responding to her presence," Patricia explained during one of their many consultations. "Somehow this child is triggering neural pathways that should not exist in you. It's as if she's acting as a bridge, allowing your brain to interpret stimuli it should be incapable of processing. Harrison, this could revolutionize everything we know about neuroscience and sensory perception. But I'm worried. We don't know if this effect is permanent, temporary, or potentially harmful. We're in completely uncharted territory. I don't care about the science right now," Harrison admitted. "I care about Lucy. Whatever she's doing for me, I need to do something for her. She gave me light. I need to give her a voice, a home, a future." Patricia studied him for a long moment. "You've changed," she said softly. "2 months ago, you were the most cynical man I knew. Now you sound like a believer." "Maybe I am," Harrison said. "The home study process was invasive and exhausting. Social workers came to his penthouse repeatedly, inspecting every room, asking probing questions about his lifestyle, his support system, his understanding of parenting. His blindness was indeed a concern for some of them, though Harrison methodically demonstrated how he had adapted his environment and could provide safe, attentive care. He hired a full-time nanny, a woman named Claire, who had experience with special needs children. He arranged for therapists, speech pathologists, and child psychologists. He built a comprehensive support network, determined to prove he could give Lucy everything she needed. Margaret watched this transformation with a mixture of amazement and concern. She had been with Harrison through the company's growth, through his most driven and ruthless business phases, and she had never seen him like this, vulnerable, hopeful, almost desperate. One evening, as Harrison worked late in his office, Margaret brought him coffee and sat down across from him uninvited. "Talk to me," she said simply. Harrison set down the legal documents he had been reviewing. "About what?" "About why you're doing this," Margaret said. "I'm not judging, Harrison. I just want to understand. You built an empire. You have everything. Why risk it all for a child you barely know?" Harrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know what it's like to live in the dark, Margaret? Not just physically, but existentially. I spent 42 years building walls around myself, creating systems and structures to compensate for what I lacked. I convinced myself that achievement was enough, that success equaled fulfillment. But it was all a lie. I was empty. And then this little girl, this silent, broken child, she showed me something I didn't even know was possible. She gave me light. Not metaphorically, actually literally gave me light. How do I not do everything in my power to protect that? To protect her?" Margaret reached across the desk and took his hand. "Then do it," she said. "But do it for the right reasons, not because she gave you something, but because she deserves it. Because every child deserves to be safe and loved." "You're right," Harrison said, "and maybe that's what I'm learning. Maybe this isn't about me at all." 3 months after that first meeting at the shelter, Harrison's foster care certification was approved. The celebration was muted because the real challenge still lay ahead. Convincing the state that Lucy should be placed with him specifically, a single blind man with no parenting experience, was a different battle entirely. Sandra Torres advocated for him. She wrote letters detailing Lucy's responses to Harrison, how the child who had been completely withdrawn with everyone else showed signs of connection with him. She documented the way Lucy would wait by the window on days Harrison was scheduled to visit, how she would become agitated if he was late, how she would hold his hand and light candles as if performing some sacred ritual. The case went before a family court judge, a stern woman named Judith Morrison, who had a reputation for putting children's welfare above all other considerations. Harrison sat in her courtroom, his attorney beside him, while Sandra and Lucy's court-appointed advocate presented the case. Judge Morrison asked Harrison direct questions. "Why do you want this child, Mr. Reed? What makes you think you can provide what she needs? How will you manage her care given your own disability?" Harrison answered honestly. He spoke about his encounter with Lucy, about what she had given him, about his commitment to giving her stability and opportunity. He acknowledged his limitations, but emphasized his resources and support system. He spoke from the heart in a way he rarely did in any context. When he finished, Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then she asked the question that would determine everything. "Does Lucy want to be with you?" Sandra stood up. "Your Honor, Lucy doesn't speak, but she communicates in other ways. And every indication we have suggests she feels safe with Mr. Reed. She responds to him in ways she responds to no one else." Judge Morrison looked at the file before her, then at Lucy, who sat quietly beside Sandra holding a small unlit candle in her hands. "I'm going to allow a trial placement," the judge said finally. 60 days with weekly check-ins from Child Services. If at any point Lucy shows signs of distress, or if Mr. Reed's arrangement proves inadequate, she will be removed immediately. Is that understood? Harrison felt a wave of relief so powerful it left him momentarily speechless. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you." The day Lucy came home was the most terrifying and exhilarating of Harrison's life. Claire, the nanny, helped Lucy settle into her new room, a space they had prepared with soft textures, nightlights, and shelves, full of art supplies. Lucy explored cautiously, her small fingers touching everything, her silence as profound as always. That first night, Harrison barely slept. He lay in his bed, listening to the sounds of his penthouse, now shared with another living being. Around 2 in the morning, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. He got up and found Lucy standing outside his bedroom door, her small silhouette barely visible in the ambient light that meant nothing to him but that Claire had installed for Lucy's comfort. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. Lucy did not answer, but she reached for his hand. He led her to the living room, and they sat together on the couch. Lucy retrieved a candle from somewhere, and Harrison heard the now familiar sound of a match being struck. The light appeared in his consciousness, warm and steady. They sat together in that space between darkness and illumination, a blind man and a mute child, connected by something neither science nor language could adequately explain. Over the following weeks, they developed routines. Mornings began with breakfast together, Harrison learning to coordinate his schedule around Lucy's needs. Claire handled most of the direct care, but Harrison insisted on being present, on being part of Lucy's daily life. They would sit together in the evenings, Lucy drawing while Harrison listened to audiobooks or worked on his tablet. And every night, Lucy would light a candle, giving Harrison his daily moment of impossible vision. The therapists Harrison had hired began working with Lucy, trying to understand her trauma and find ways to help her communicate. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist specializing in selective mutism and trauma, met with Lucy 3 times a week. After the first month, Dr. Chen met with Harrison to discuss her findings. "She's not physically mute," Dr. Chen explained. "Her vocal cords are fine. This is psychological. Something happened to her before she came to the shelter, something that made her stop speaking. She's using other forms of expression to compensate. The drawing, the patterns, the candles. These are all communication attempts." "Can we help her speak again?" Harrison asked. "Maybe," Dr. Chen said. "But it has to be on her terms, in her time. Forcing it would only cause more harm. For now, we're working on alternative communication methods, sign language, picture boards, writing. She's very intelligent, Harrison. Once we give her the right tools, I think she'll have a lot to say." Harrison absorbed this information, feeling both hopeful and heartbroken. What kind of trauma would make a child stop speaking entirely? What had Lucy endured before she found her way to that shelter? He tried to research her background, but the information was frustratingly scarce. Lucy had been found wandering near the port 3 weeks before Harrison met her. No missing person reports matched her description. No one had claimed her. It was as if she had materialized out of nowhere, a ghost child with no past. The 60-day trial period passed more quickly than Harrison expected. The social workers who conducted weekly visits noted Lucy's progress. She was gaining weight, sleeping better, showing fewer signs of acute distress. Her attachment to Harrison was obvious and appeared healthy. When Judge Morrison reviewed the case again, she approved an extension of the placement for 6 more months, with the possibility of permanent guardianship if things continued to go well. Harrison felt his life shifting in fundamental ways. The company that had once consumed all his attention now felt less urgent. He delegated more, trusted his team more, and spent his evenings at home with Lucy, instead of at the office reviewing quarterly reports. Margaret joked that he had become almost human, and he did not disagree. But the question of Lucy's effect on his vision remained a fascinating mystery. Dr. Patricia Huang published a carefully worded paper in a neuroscience journal describing an unnamed patient with congenital blindness who showed unprecedented neural activity in the presence of a specific environmental stimulus. The paper created a stir in the medical community, with researchers from around the world reaching out to request more information. Patricia politely deflected them all, protecting Harrison's and Lucy's privacy. Meanwhile, Harrison began to notice something new. The light Lucy created was becoming more complex. At first, it had been simple, just a point of brightness. But over time, he started to perceive variations, different intensities, different qualities. He could tell when Lucy used white candles versus colored ones, though he had no way to know which color was which. He began to sense movement, shadows, the dance of flame in ways that suggested his brain was learning to process visual information in real time. One evening, about 4 months into Lucy's placement with him, something extraordinary happened. Lucy was in her room working on one of her elaborate drawings. Harrison sat nearby listening to her pencil scratch against paper, content just to be in her presence. Then Lucy lit a candle, as she often did while drawing. The light appeared in Harrison's awareness as usual, but this time it did not remain a simple point. It began to expand, to differentiate. He perceived the candle's flame, distinct and contained, and beyond it, something else, a shape. Blurred and indistinct, but unmistakably three-dimensional. It took him a moment to realize what he was seeing. Lucy. He was seeing Lucy's silhouette, backlit by the candle she held. Harrison gasped. The image vanished immediately, as if his shock had severed the connection. But it had been there. For perhaps 3 seconds, he had seen the outline of the child who had changed his life. "Lucy," he whispered. "Did you feel that? Did something just happen?" Lucy came to him, took his hand, and placed it on her cheek. It was the most deliberate gesture of affection she had ever shown him. Harrison felt tears streaming down his face. "I saw you," he said, his voice breaking. "Just for a moment, but I saw you." He called Dr. Huang immediately. She arrived at the penthouse within an hour, portable scanning equipment in tow. Over the next 3 hours, she conducted every test she could manage outside a hospital setting. The results were undeniable. Harrison's visual cortex was showing activity levels unprecedented for someone with his diagnosis. Something was fundamentally changing in his brain. "This should not be possible," Patricia kept saying. "Neural pathways don't just grow in adulthood, especially not in regions that have never functioned." "Harrison, you're rewriting everything we thought we knew about the brain's plasticity." "What does this mean?" Harrison asked. "Will it continue? Could I actually see someday?" "I don't know," Patricia admitted, "but whatever is happening, it's connected to Lucy. Her presence seems to be acting as a catalyst for neural development in your brain. It's as if she's teaching your brain how to see, guiding it through some process we don't understand." "Harrison, I want to study this more intensively, with your permission. This could help millions of people with visual impairments." Harrison hesitated. Lucy's privacy was paramount, but Patricia was right. If this phenomenon could be understood and replicated, it could change lives. "As long as Lucy is protected," he said finally, "as long as she's not treated as a specimen or experiment. She's a child, not a research subject." "I understand," Patricia said. "We'll be careful. I promise." Over the following months, Harrison's visual perception continued to develop. The episodes became longer, more detailed. He began to recognize shapes consistently, to distinguish between different light sources. He still could not see in any conventional sense when Lucy was not present, but when she was near. When she lit her candles, his world transformed. Lucy, meanwhile, was blossoming in other ways. With Dr. Chen's help, She began learning sign language. Her hands, so delicate and precise, proved remarkably adept at forming the gestures. Within weeks, she was communicating basic needs and preferences. Within months, she was expressing complex thoughts and emotions. The first time Lucy signed "I love you" to Harrison, he wept. Claire had to translate the gesture for him, his own knowledge of sign language still rudimentary. But the meaning transcended any language barrier. Lucy's drawings, which had always been intricate, began to reveal even more. Dr. Chen noticed that many of them depicted memories, fragments of Lucy's past that she could not or would not verbalize. There were pictures of a woman, presumably Lucy's mother, images of a small house near water, drawings of fire, rendered over and over in careful detail. One drawing in particular caught everyone's attention. It showed a little girl holding a candle, standing before a man whose eyes were closed. Light radiated from the candle in elaborate patterns surrounding both figures. At the bottom of the page, Lucy had written in careful block letters her first written words since arriving at the shelter. "Light finds light." Dr. Chen brought the drawing to Harrison. She showed it to him by describing it in detail, then asked, "Do you know what she means by this?" Harrison ran his fingers over the paper, feeling the indentations Lucy's pencil had made. "I think so," he said quietly. "I think she's saying that we were both lost in darkness, and somehow we found each other. Light finds light." "It's beautiful," Dr. Chen said. "Harrison, she's healing. Slowly, but genuinely. Whatever happened to her before, she's beginning to move past it. And I think you are too." Harrison knew she was right. The existential emptiness that had plagued him before. Meeting Lucy had vanished. He woke up each day with purpose, with joy even. His blindness, which had defined him for so long, now felt less like a limitation and more like simply one aspect of who he was. Lucy had not cured him, but she had transformed him. As the 6-month review approached, Harrison met with James Whitmore again to discuss permanent guardianship. The legal process was complex, but the foundation had been laid. Lucy had been with him for half a year without any issues. The social worker's reports were glowing. Judge Morrison had indicated she was inclined to grant permanent custody. But there was one complication. To finalize guardianship, they would need to make more intensive efforts to locate Lucy's biological family. It was a legal requirement, one that Harrison had been dreading. Part of him feared that someone would appear to claim her, to take her away from the life they had built together. Another part of him felt guilty for that fear, knowing that Lucy deserved to know where she came from, who her family was. Sandra Torres took on the task of conducting a more thorough search. She worked with police, social services, and even private investigators. She published Lucy's photo in newspapers and on social media, asking anyone with information to come forward. For weeks, there was nothing. Then, a lead emerged. A woman in the Florida Keys saw Lucy's photo and contacted Sandra. She recognized Lucy as the granddaughter of her former neighbor, a woman named Elena Martinez, who had passed away about 6 months earlier. According to the neighbor, Eleanor had been raising Lucy alone after Lucy's mother had left them years before. When Elena died suddenly of a heart attack, no other family had been located. Lucy, who had been homeschooled and relatively isolated, had apparently run away from temporary foster placement shortly after her grandmother's death. That was presumably when she ended up in Miami, wandering the streets until she found her way to the shelter. The pieces began to fit together. Lucy's obsession with candles made sense now. Her grandmother had been deeply religious, the neighbor explained, and had kept candles burning constantly in their small home. The trauma of losing her grandmother, the only stable figure in her life, had rendered Lucy mute. Sandra shared this information with Harrison gently, knowing it would be difficult for him to hear. Lucy had a history, a past filled with love and loss. She was not just a mysterious child who had appeared in his life. She was a little girl who had lost everything. Harrison asked Sandra to take him to the Keys to see where Lucy had come from. They made the drive on a Saturday, Lucy coming along though she did not know where they were going. The house was small and weathered, painted a fading blue, situated just blocks from the ocean. It had been sitting empty since Elena's death. slowly deteriorating in the salt air. They walked through the rooms, Claire describing everything to Harrison while Lucy explored silently. The house still contained Eleanor's belongings, untouched by relatives who had never materialized. There were religious icons on the walls, photographs of a younger Lucy with an older woman who must have been Elena, and everywhere candles, dozens of them in holders and jars, on shelves and tables. In Lucy's small bedroom, they found more drawings, similar to the ones she created now but older, the paper yellowed. They found books about light, about saints, about miracles, and they found a letter written in Spanish, in an elderly hand, addressed to whom it may concern. Sandra translated it for Harrison. It was from Elena, written apparently in the weeks before her death, as if she had sensed her time was limited. The letter explained that Lucy was special, that she had a gift Elena did not fully understand. Since she was very small, Lucy could do things with light that seemed impossible. She could make candles burn brighter or dimmer with her presence. She could create patterns of shadow and illumination that seemed to communicate meaning. Elena had kept Lucy sheltered, fearing that the outside world would not understand, would try to exploit or study the child. She begged whoever found the letter to protect Lucy, to let her live a normal life, to not let her gift become a burden. Harrison listened to Sandra read, his heart aching for the grandmother who had tried so hard to shield her granddaughter, and for the child who had lost that protection. He knelt down to where he sensed Lucy standing and pulled her into a hug. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on tight. "I promise," Harrison whispered into Lucy's hair, "I promise I'll protect you. I promise you'll be safe. I promise I'll love you for exactly who you are." They took some of Elena's belongings back to Miami. Photographs, a few of Lucy's favorite books, and a beautiful candle holder carved from wood that Elena had apparently treasured. Harrison had it placed in Lucy's room, a connection to the grandmother who had loved her first. The discovery of Lucy's history actually strengthened Harrison's guardianship case. With no other living relatives and clear documentation of Elena's wishes for Lucy to be protected and loved, Judge Morrison granted Harrison permanent legal guardianship. 6 months after Lucy had saved him on a rainy street, she officially became part of his family. The celebration was quiet and private, just Harrison, Lucy, Claire, Margaret, and a few close friends. Harrison gave Lucy a gift, a bracelet with a small charm shaped like a candle flame. Lucy immediately put it on and signed "Thank you," her small hands moving with practiced precision. That night, after everyone had left, Harrison and Lucy sat together on the penthouse balcony. The Miami skyline stretched out before them, lights glittering across the darkness. Harrison could not see it in any traditional sense, but with Lucy beside him holding a candle against the night, he perceived something, not the full vista but impressions, points of light, depth, distance, a world slowly revealing itself. Lucy took his hand and placed it over her heart. Then she took his other hand and placed it over his own heart. Harrison understood. Their hearts beat together, two people who had found each other in darkness and were learning slowly to live in light. The journey was far from over. There were still questions without answers, mysteries to unravel about Lucy's abilities and Harrison's unprecedented neural development. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the small hand in his, the steady presence beside him, and the unshakable certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Together. The months following Lucy's official placement with Harrison brought changes neither of them could have anticipated. What began as a tentative arrangement between a broken child and a man searching for meaning evolved into something profound. A family, not in the conventional sense perhaps, but family nonetheless. And with that evolution came new challenges, new discoveries, and new questions about the extraordinary connection they shared. Harrison's company, Reed Tech Industries, had always been his primary focus, the empire he built through relentless determination and innovation. But as Lucy became central to his life, his priorities shifted dramatically. He found himself leaving meetings early to attend Lucy's therapy sessions. He rescheduled international conferences to be present for her school enrollment. He turned down speaking engagements and board positions that would have once felt essential. Margaret managed the details with her characteristic efficiency, but even she noticed the transformation in her boss. Harrison Reed, the man who once worked 18-hour days without complaint, now insisted on being home for dinner every evening. The decision to enroll Lucy in school was not simple. Dr. Chen advised that mainstream education might be overwhelming for a child who was still recovering from significant trauma and who communicated primarily through sign language. But Harrison wanted Lucy to have as normal a childhood as possible. After extensive research and consultation with education specialists, they found a private school in Coral Gables that specialized in inclusive education. The Academy of the Arts had experience with children who had diverse learning needs and communication styles. More importantly, they approached education through creative expression, which seemed perfectly suited to Lucy's visual and artistic inclinations. The first day of school was harder on Harrison than on Lucy. He stood in the Academy's lobby with Claire, listening to the sounds of children laughing and talking in hallways he could not see, worrying about whether Lucy would be accepted, whether she would be safe, whether he was making the right choice. Lucy, meanwhile, had walked into her classroom with quiet confidence, her small backpack decorated with stars that Harrison had selected by feel, her candle charm bracelet glinting on her wrist. "She'll be fine," Claire assured him. "She's stronger than you think." Claire was right. Lucy adapted to school with remarkable resilience. Her teacher, a patient woman named Miss Rebecca, learned sign language basics to communicate with Lucy and encouraged the other students to do the same. Within weeks, several of Lucy's classmates were signing simple phrases to her. Lucy's artwork, always impressive, became legendary in the school. Her drawings were so detailed, so emotionally evocative, that Miss Rebecca began displaying them in the school's gallery space, usually reserved for much older students. But it was Lucy's relationship with light that truly set her apart. During a science unit, on energy, Lucy demonstrated an intuitive understanding of optics, reflection, and luminescence that astonished her teachers. She created a project using candles, mirrors, and colored glass that produced patterns of light so beautiful and mathematically complex that the school's science coordinator asked if she could present it at a district education conference. Harrison agreed, proud and slightly awed by this child who communicated more through illumination than words. At home, Harrison and Lucy developed routines that honored both their needs. Mornings began with breakfast together, Lucy signing about her dreams, while Harrison listened and responded. He had become proficient in sign language, working with a tutor several hours a week to ensure he could communicate with Lucy fully. Afternoons were for homework and therapy, with Dr. Chen visiting twice a week and a sign language specialist coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Evenings belonged to them. They would sit together in the living room, Lucy drawing or reading, while Harrison worked on accessible technology projects he brought home from the office. And every night before bed, Lucy would light a candle, giving Harrison his daily gift of vision. These moments of sight had become more sophisticated over time. Harrison could now perceive not just Lucy's silhouette but features, the shape of her face though still blurred, the movement of her hands when she signed, the way her hair fell across her shoulders. He still could not see color in any conventional way, but he could detect differences in tone and intensity. Light and shadow had become his vocabulary for understanding the visual world. It was not complete vision, nothing close to what sighted people experienced, but it was miraculous nonetheless. Dr. Patricia Huang continued to document Harrison's neurological development, now joined by a team of researchers from the University of Miami and Johns Hopkins. They published papers, presented findings at conferences, and theorized endlessly about the mechanism behind Harrison's unprecedented visual recovery. Some believed Lucy emitted some kind of bioelectric field that stimulated Harrison's neural pathways. Others thought it was purely psychological, a manifestation of extreme neuroplasticity triggered by emotional connection. A few, more daringly, suggested quantum entanglement between their neural systems. None of the theories were fully satisfying because none could be definitively proven. What everyone agreed on was that the effect was real and measurable. Harrison's brain scans showed continued development in his visual cortex, growth that should have been impossible in an adult who had never processed visual information, and the effect was specific to Lucy. Other children, other people, other sources of light produced no similar response. It was only Lucy's presence, and specifically when she manipulated light, that triggered Harrison's vision. This specificity raised questions that Harrison found both fascinating and unsettling. What if something happened to Lucy? What if she moved away, grew up, went to college? Would his hard-won vision disappear? Was he dependent on a child for something as fundamental as sensory perception? The thought troubled him late at night when he could not sleep. But there was another question that troubled him even more. What was this ability doing to Lucy? Was it draining her somehow? Was there a cost to being Harrison's bridge to the visual world? Dr. Chen assured him that Lucy showed no signs of physical or psychological harm from their connection. If anything, Lucy seemed to thrive on it, lighting candles for Harrison with obvious joy, proud of the gift she could give him. But Harrison could not shake the worry that he was taking something from her, using her in some way, even if unintentionally. He shared these concerns with Margaret one evening at the office. She had stayed late to help him prepare for a board meeting, and they sat in his office with coffee. As the Miami skyline darkened outside windows, Harrison still could not see without Lucy's help. "You're overthinking this," Margaret said gently. "Lucy isn't being harmed, she's being loved. That's what matters." "But what if she feels obligated?" Harrison argued. "What if she thinks she has to do this for me? What if her gift becomes a burden?" "Then she'll tell you," Margaret replied. "Harrison, Lucy is not a passive child. She has agency, preferences, opinions. If lighting candles for you made her unhappy, she would stop. The fact that she continues, that she initiates it most of the time, tells you everything you need to know. She wants to share this with you." Harrison considered this. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm projecting my own fears onto her." "Maybe you're learning what every parent learns," Margaret said with a slight smile. "That loving someone means accepting you can't control everything, can't protect them from everything, and have to trust that what you're giving them is enough." Her words resonated with Harrison long after their conversation ended. He was learning to be a parent in his 40s, learning to put someone else's needs before his own, learning to love without expectation or condition. It was the hardest and most rewarding thing he had ever done. As Lucy's first year with Harrison approached its anniversary, he decided to do something significant. He had been considering it for months, discussing it with his team at ReadTech, consulting with advisors and architects. Now he was ready to announce it publicly. He called a press conference, something he rarely did, and invited media from across the country to ReadTech's headquarters. The conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and interested observers. Harrison stood at the podium, Lucy beside him holding his hand, and made his announcement. He was founding a new institute, the Elena Martinez Institute for Sensory Communication, named after Lucy's grandmother. The institute would be dedicated to researching alternative forms of communication and sensory perception, with a specific focus on helping children with disabilities find their unique ways of interacting with the world. But it would not just be a research facility, it would also be a school and therapy center, a place where children like Lucy could learn and grow in environments that celebrated rather than pathologized their differences. Harrison was donating $20 million of his personal fortune to establish the institute, along with committing ReadTech resources to developing new assistive technologies specifically for the institute's use. The location would be in Coconut Grove, on a beautiful piece of waterfront property that Harrison had quietly purchased months earlier. The campus would include classrooms, therapy spaces, sensory gardens, and an art studio designed for children who, like Lucy, expressed themselves through visual mediums. There would be a dedicated space for light-based therapies, with rooms equipped with sophisticated lighting systems that could be programmed for different therapeutic purposes. Lucy would be involved in the institute's design and programming. Her artwork would decorate the walls. Her insights into non-verbal communication would help shape the curriculum. She would not be a symbol or a mascot, but an active participant in creating something meaningful. The press conference generated significant media attention. Stories about Harrison and Lucy, about their improbable connection and the institute it had inspired, appeared in newspapers and magazines across the country. Some coverage was respectful and thoughtful. Some was sensationalized, calling Lucy a miracle child and Harrison a man who had been healed by divine intervention. Harrison hated that kind of coverage, but he tolerated it for the sake of the Institute's mission. What mattered more were the responses from families with disabled children. Letters and emails poured in from parents who had been struggling to find appropriate services for their kids. Applications arrived from therapists and educators who wanted to work at the Institute. Donations came from people who had been touched by Harrison and Lucy's story and wanted to support the work. Within weeks, the Institute had a waiting list of children hoping to enroll once it opened. Construction began that spring. Harrison visited the site regularly, Lucy always with him. She would run through the partially built spaces, her footsteps echoing in empty rooms, while Harrison listened and imagined what the finished building would feel like. Architects described their plans to him in detail, walking him through layouts, explaining sightlines and natural lighting features that Lucy would appreciate, even if Harrison could not fully visualize them. Lucy, meanwhile, contributed her own ideas through drawings and signed suggestions. She wanted a room filled entirely with mirrors and candles. She wanted a garden with night-blooming flowers. She wanted a library where children could read by candlelight if they chose. The design team incorporated all of it. But as the Institute took shape, something unexpected began to happen. Other children, some enrolled in programs through ReadTech's charitable foundation, started exhibiting unusual responses when they spent time with Lucy. A boy with autism, who rarely made eye contact, began tracking the movement of flames when Lucy lit candles near him. A girl with cerebral palsy who had limited fine motor control showed improved hand coordination after sessions where Lucy taught her simple shadow puppet games. A deaf child who had been struggling with emotional regulation became calmer when Lucy showed her patterns of flickering light. Dr. Chen documented these cases carefully, unsure what to make of them. "It's not the same as what happens with you and Lucy," she explained to Harrison. "These children aren't developing new sensory abilities, but they are responding to her in ways that seem therapeutic, almost healing. I don't know if it's Lucy specifically, or if it's the way she uses light as a communication tool, but something is working." Harrison felt both excited and protective. He wanted these children to benefit from whatever Lucy could offer, but he also did not want Lucy to feel pressured or exploited. He talked with her about it, using sign language and simple concepts to ensure she understood. She signed back enthusiastically that she wanted to help, that she liked working with other children, that making light dance made her happy. So Lucy became an informal therapist in training, working alongside Dr. Chen and other professionals at preliminary programs they set up before the Institute officially opened. She would sit with children in quiet rooms, lighting candles and creating patterns of light and shadow. She would teach them simple signing. She would draw with them, encouraging expression through art. And remarkably, consistently, the children improved. Not miraculously, not dramatically, but measurably. Their engagement increased. Their communication attempts became more frequent. Their anxiety decreased. One child in particular formed a strong bond with Lucy. His name was Marcus, a 6-year-old boy who had been born prematurely and suffered from cortical visual impairment, a condition where the brain struggles to process visual information even though the eyes function normally. Marcus could see, technically, but his brain could not make sense of what his eyes reported. The world was a confusing jumble of incomprehensible stimuli. He had been in therapy for years with minimal progress. Lucy met Marcus during one of the pre-institute trial programs. She approached him with her characteristic quiet confidence and signed hello, even though Marcus could not yet understand sign language. Then she lit a candle and held it at different distances from Marcus's face, moving it slowly, letting him try to track it. For the first time in his therapy records, Marcus successfully followed an object with his eyes for more than a few seconds. His mother, watching from the observation room, burst into tears. Over the following weeks, Lucy worked with Marcus regularly. She created increasingly complex light patterns for him to observe. She used mirrors to show him reflection and perspective. She taught him to draw what he saw, even if what he saw was fragmented and confused, and slowly, measurably, Marcus's brain began to make sense of visual input. His doctors were astonished. They ran tests, adjusted his diagnosis, tried to understand what was happening. But the common factor in all his improvement was Lucy and her patient, persistent use of light as a teaching tool. Harrison watched this unfold with a mixture of pride and wonder. Lucy had gone from a traumatized, silent child to a healer in her own right. She was finding her purpose, her voice, through helping others. It was beautiful and humbling. But it also raised new concerns. As word spread about Lucy's unusual effectiveness with difficult cases, requests for her involvement increased. Parents begged for their children to work with her. Therapists wanted her input on cases. Researchers asked to study her methods. Harrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to set boundaries to protect Lucy from becoming overwhelmed or exploited, even by well-meaning people with good intentions. He talked about it with Lucy's therapy team, trying to figure out how to balance Lucy's obvious gift and desire to help with her need to simply be a child. They established strict limits. Lucy could work with children 2 afternoons a week, no more. Sessions had to be short, no longer than 30 minutes. Lucy had to have the option to say no to any session without explanation or pressure. And most importantly, Lucy's own therapy and education had to remain the priority. She was still healing, still learning, still growing. She could not be expected to carry the weight of other people's needs at the expense of her own development. These boundaries helped, but they did not fully resolve Harrison's unease. He could not shake the feeling that Lucy's abilities, whatever they were, would eventually attract attention that might not be benevolent. What if pharmaceutical companies tried to study her, to isolate whatever made her special? What if government agencies became interested? What if someone tried to exploit her for profit or power? The world could be cruel to those who were different, and Lucy was profoundly, inexplicably different. He shared these fears with James Whitmore, his attorney. James took the concerns seriously. "We should consider legal protections," James advised. "Medical privacy laws, guardianship provisions that give you full authority over any research or commercial use of information about Lucy. Maybe even a trust that ensures her financial security and gives her control over her own narrative when she's older." They implemented all of it, building layers of legal protection around Lucy. It felt excessive, paranoid even, but Harrison would rather be overly cautious than leave Lucy vulnerable. He had promised to protect her, and he intended to keep that promise regardless of how extreme the measures seemed. As summer approached and Lucy's first full year with Harrison drew to a close, they took a trip together to celebrate. Harrison rented a house in Key West, wanting to show Lucy the ocean where her grandmother had lived, where her earliest years had been spent. Claire came along to help, and they spent a week in the tropical heat, exploring beaches and old town streets. Lucy loved the water. She would stand at the edge of the waves, letting them wash over her feet. Her face turned toward the sun with an expression of pure contentment. Harrison would stand beside her, listening to the rhythm of the ocean, feeling the spray on his face, holding Lucy's hand. In those moments, his lack of conventional sight felt less like a disability and more like simply a different way of experiencing the world. One evening, they watched the sunset from the deck of their rental house. Harrison could not see it, of course, but Lucy described it to him through sign language. She told him about the colors, the way the sky changed from blue to orange to purple. She told him about the clouds, the way the light painted them in brilliant hues. And then she lit a candle, and Harrison saw his own version of the sunset. Not the full glory of it, not the way Lucy described, but something. Light fading, darkness approaching, the eternal dance between illumination and shadow. They sat together as night fell, and Lucy signed something Harrison would remember for the rest of his life. She signed, "You are my light too." Harrison felt tears on his face. "How?" he asked. "How am I your light?" Lucy thought for a moment, then signed slowly, carefully. "Before you, I was alone in the dark. You gave me a home. You gave me love. You taught me I could speak without words. You are the light that showed me I matter." Harrison pulled her close. this extraordinary child who had changed everything, and held her as the stars emerged above them, lights he could not see but knew were there, just like so much else in his transformed life. When they returned to Miami, construction on the Elena Martinez Institute was in its final phase. The building was stunning. Even Harrison could tell from the descriptions and the feel of the spaces. It was designed to be a place of beauty and accessibility, where children of all abilities could learn and grow together. The grand opening was scheduled for late August, just before the new school year. Harrison planned a ceremony that would honor Elena's memory, celebrate Lucy's journey, and launch the Institute's mission. But 2 weeks before the opening, something happened that threatened everything. Harrison received a call from an unknown number late one night. The voice on the other end was male, unfamiliar, and unsettling. He claimed to represent her research consortium interested in studying Lucy. He offered money, substantial amounts for access to her, for permission to run tests to understand her abilities. When Harrison refused and hung up, the calls continued. Different numbers, different voices, but the same message. They wanted Lucy. Harrison contacted law enforcement, hired security, and increased protections around his home and Lucy's school. He briefed Claire, Margaret, and everyone else in Lucy's life about the potential threat. He refused to be intimidated, refused to let fear control him, but he also refused to take any chances with Lucy's safety. The calls eventually stopped, but the incident left Harrison shaken. It confirmed his worst fears. There were people out there who saw Lucy not as a child, not as a person, but as a phenomenon to be studied, exploited, monetized. It made him even more determined to protect her, to ensure the Institute would be a safe haven rather than a spotlight that attracted dangerous attention. Despite the threats, the Institute's opening proceeded as planned. The ceremony was beautiful, emotional, and well attended. Families of children who would enroll in the programs came to tour the facility. Donors and supporters mingled with staff and therapists. Local politicians gave speeches about the importance of inclusive education and innovative approaches to disability services. Through it all, Lucy remained calm and present, signing thank you to everyone who approached her, lighting candles throughout the building as part of the dedication ritual. Harrison gave a speech, brief and heartfelt. He talked about Elena Martinez, the grandmother who had loved Lucy unconditionally and protected her fiercely. He talked about his own journey from darkness to light, both literal and metaphorical. He talked about the children the Institute would serve and the lives it would hopefully change. And he talked about Lucy, the silent teacher who had shown him that sometimes the most profound communication happens without words. As the ceremony concluded and the sun set over Biscayne Bay, visible through the Institute's floor-to-ceiling windows, Lucy did something she had never done before. She stood at the front of the main gathering space, surrounded by candles she had carefully arranged in a circular pattern. Then, in the presence of dozens of witnesses, she opened her mouth and spoke. Her voice was small and rough from disuse, but clear. Her first words in over a year. "Thank you," Lucy said. "Thank you for seeing me." The room fell silent, then erupted in gasps and applause. Harrison stood frozen, overwhelmed by emotion. Dr. Chen rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. Claire covered her mouth in shock, and Lucy, beautiful, brave Lucy, smiled. She had chosen this moment, this place, this gathering of people who believed in her, to reclaim her voice. Harrison made his way through the crowd to Lucy's side. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "You spoke," he whispered. "Lucy, you spoke." "I wanted to," Lucy said simply, her voice still small but steady. "I wanted everyone to hear me say thank you. Thank you to you most of all." Harrison pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as the applause continued around them. In that moment, surrounded by light from dozens of candles, in a building created to honor Lucy's grandmother and celebrate Lucy's gifts, Harrison understood something fundamental. They had saved each other. He had given Lucy a home, safety, and love. And she had given him light, vision, and purpose. It was not a debt to be repaid. It was grace. It was gift. It was family. The Institute opened its doors to students the following week. 30 children enrolled in the first cohort, representing a range of abilities and challenges. Lucy attended the Institute's school program, finally in an environment specifically designed for children like her. She thrived there, making friends with other students, working with therapists who understood her unique needs, and continuing to help younger children through her light-based play and patient presence. Harrison divided his time between Reed Tech and the Institute, finding balance between his business responsibilities and his commitment to the work Lucy had inspired. He hired excellent people to run day-to-day operations at both places, freeing himself to be present for the things that mattered most: family dinners, school performances, therapy sessions, the quiet evenings at home when Lucy would practice her speaking voice, slowly rebuilding strength and confidence in verbal communication, even as she continued to sign and draw and create with light. Dr. Patricia Huang published a groundbreaking paper about Harrison's neurological development, carefully protecting his and Lucy's identities, but sharing enough information to advance the field of neuroscience significantly. The paper sparked worldwide interest in neuroplasticity and sensory perception. Researchers began exploring new therapies for blindness and other sensory impairments, inspired by Harrison's unprecedented recovery. He took satisfaction in knowing that his experience might help others, even if the specific mechanism that helped him remained unique and mysterious. As Lucy's voice grew stronger and her vocabulary expanded, she shared more about her life before Harrison. She remembered her grandmother Elena with love and grief, talking about the prayers they said together, the candles they lit, the quiet life they lived by the ocean. She talked about being scared after Elena died, about running away from strangers who did not understand her, about wandering Miami's streets feeling lost, hand alone until she saw Harrison standing too close to the road, and something inside her said, "Help him." "Why did you help me?" Harrison asked her one evening as they sat together on their balcony. "You didn't know me. You were alone and scared. Why did you stop?" Lucy considered the question seriously. "I saw you," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Not with my eyes, with something else. I saw that you were lost too. I saw that you needed light. And I knew I could give it to you." Her answer was simple but profound. 2 lost people, one blind and one mute, finding each other in urban chaos and recognizing something in each other that no one else could see. It was not magic, though it felt magical. It was not miracle, though it seemed miraculous. It was human connection at its most fundamental level. It was love. As the first anniversary of the Institute's opening approached, Harrison and Lucy prepared for another celebration. But this one was quieter, more personal. Just the two of them, Claire, Margaret, Dr. Chen, and a few close friends gathered at the penthouse for dinner. Lucy had requested a cake with candles, lots of them, and Harrison had obliged. She blew them out one by one as everyone counted, her voice joining theirs, strong and clear. When only one candle remained burning, she carried it to Harrison and placed it in his hands. "This is yours," she said, "always yours. My light for you." Harrison held the candle carefully, feeling its warmth, smelling the wax, and seeing, impossibly but truly, the flame dancing in his mind's eye. "And always mine for you," he replied. "Whatever light I have, it's yours." 3 years had passed since that rainy March afternoon, when a small hand pulled Harrison Reed from the edge of danger and into a life he never imagined possible. 3 years of transformation, growth, challenges, and profound love. Harrison was 45 now, Lucy was 10, and the family they had built together was as real as any, bound by blood. But as Lucy approached adolescence, new complexities emerged, testing the foundations of everything they had created. The Elena Martinez Institute had become a beacon in the disability services community. Over 200 children now participated in its programs, from full-time students like Lucy to those who came for specialized therapies and weekend workshops. The Institute's research wing published studies on alternative communication methods, sensory integration therapies, and the neuroplasticity potential in children with various disabilities. Harrison's initial $20 million investment had grown through donations and grants into an endowment of nearly $60 million, ensuring the Institute's sustainability for decades to come. Lucy had become the heart of the Institute in ways even Harrison had not anticipated. Now speaking fluently, though she still preferred sign language in many situations, Lucy served as a peer mentor for younger children. She led light therapy sessions, taught art classes, and spoke at fundraising events with poise that belied her young age. She had published a children's book, illustrated with her own drawings, about a girl who spoke with colors instead of words. The book became a bestseller in the special needs education market, and Lucy donated all the proceeds to the Institute. But success brought scrutiny. As the Institute's reputation grew, so did interest in Lucy's unique abilities. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell her story. Medical researchers requested permission to study her. Technology companies approached Harrison with proposals to develop devices based on Lucy's light manipulation techniques. Harrison declined. Almost everything, determined to let Lucy have as normal a childhood as possible. But Lucy herself was becoming increasingly curious about her abilities, asking questions that Harrison struggled to answer. "Why can I do things other people can't?" she asked him one evening. They were in the Institute's greenhouse, one of Lucy's favorite spaces, surrounded by plants and the golden light of late afternoon. "Am I different? Am I broken?" Harrison felt his heart constrict. "You're not broken, Lucy. You're extraordinary. Some people have perfect pitch. Some have photographic memories. You have this incredible relationship with light. It's a gift, not a flaw." "But why?" Lucy pressed. "Where did it come from? Was it Grandma Elena? Was it something that happened to me? And why does it help you see?" These were questions Harrison had pondered for years without finding satisfactory answers. Dr. Patricia Huang and her research team had theories but no definitive explanations. The connection between Lucy's light manipulation and Harrison's visual development remained scientifically inexplicable. They had documented it, measured it, written papers about it, but understood it? No, not really. "I don't know why," Harrison admitted, "but I know this. Whatever the source of your gift, you get to decide how to use it. You get to decide if you want to share it or keep it private. You get to decide what it means in your life. It's yours, Lucy. Not mine, not the Institute's, not anyone else's. Yours." Lucy considered this, her young face serious beyond her years. "I think I want to understand it," she said finally. "I want to know why I'm like this. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay," Harrison said, "and we'll help you figure it out, in whatever way feels right to you." This conversation marked a turning point. Lucy began working more formally with the research team, participating in studies designed to measure and understand her abilities. They discovered fascinating things. Lucy could consistently distinguish between different wavelengths of light with accuracy far beyond normal human perception, even while blindfolded. She could manipulate flame direction and intensity through breathing techniques no one had taught her. She could create complex light patterns that seemed to have measurable effects on observers' neurological states, inducing calm, focus, or alertness depending on the pattern's configuration. But perhaps most remarkably, they discovered that Lucy's abilities were not entirely unique. Through careful screening, they identified 3 other children worldwide with similar though less pronounced capabilities. A girl in Japan who could make lanterns burn brighter or dimmer at will. A boy in Sweden who seemed to soothe others through careful manipulation of candle flames. A teenager in Brazil who created light patterns that helped people with migraines. The phenomenon was rare, but not singular. Lucy was not alone. This discovery was both comforting and unsettling. It suggested Lucy's abilities were not supernatural, but rather an extreme expression of some latent human capacity. It raised the possibility that others might develop similar skills with proper training and environment. But it also meant that Lucy was not uniquely special in the way they had thought. She was part of a small but real population of individuals with extraordinary sensory capabilities. Lucy took the news with characteristic maturity. "So I'm not a miracle," she said. "I'm just rare." "Is there a difference?" Harrison asked gently. "Miracles are rare too." Lucy smiled at that. "I guess you're right." As Lucy grew more confident in understanding her abilities, she also grew more confident in herself. She made close friends at the institute, other children who understood what it was like to be different. She joined the school's drama club, performing in plays where her expressive signing and emotional intensity made her a standout. She started a blog where she wrote about her experiences, offering advice and encouragement to other kids with disabilities. She was becoming her own person, distinct from Harrison, developing her own identity and independence. This was exactly what Harrison wanted for her, but it also scared him. As Lucy needed him less for daily support, as she became more capable and self-sufficient, Harrison felt the inevitable fear of every parent. He was becoming less essential to her life. She would grow up, move on, forge her own path. And when she did, what would happen to his vision? Would it disappear when Lucy no longer lived with him, when she no longer lit candles in his presence every day? He tried not to think about it, tried not to let the fear of loss poison the joy of watching Lucy flourish. But late at night, when he lay awake in his bedroom, the old darkness surrounding him again, he could not help but wonder if his time in the light was temporary, if everything Lucy had given him would eventually be taken away. Dr. Huang noticed his anxiety during one of their regular checkups. "Harrison," she said gently, "what's bothering you? Your neural activity is stable, your overall health is excellent, but you seem stressed." He hesitated, then admitted the truth. "I'm afraid of losing what Lucy gave me. When she grows up and leaves, will I go back to complete blindness?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "We don't know," she said honestly. "Your visual development might be permanent now, the neural pathways sufficiently established to function independently. Or it might still require Lucy's proximity to activate. There's no precedent for this, Harrison, but I'll tell you what I do know. You lived 42 years in complete darkness and built an extraordinary life. If the worst happens and you lose this partial vision, you'll adapt. You always do." "But I don't want to," Harrison admitted quietly. "I don't want to lose this." Seeing Lucy's face, even hazily, watching her move through the world, perceiving light and shadow. "Patricia, I never thought I could have this. Now that I do, the idea of losing it is unbearable." Patricia reached across the desk and took his hand, then talked to Lucy about it. "Don't carry this fear alone. She's wise beyond her years, Harrison. She might surprise you." That evening, Harrison did exactly that. After dinner, he asked Lucy to sit with him on the balcony, their usual talking place. The Miami night was warm and humid, the sounds of the city providing gentle background noise. "Lucy, I need to talk to you about something," Harrison began. "It's about my vision, and about us." Lucy immediately looked concerned. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," Harrison assured her. "But I've been thinking about the future. You're growing up, becoming independent. Someday you'll go to college, have your own life, maybe move away. And I'm so proud of that, Lucy. I want all of that for you, but I'm also afraid. When you're not with me anymore, I might lose the vision you've given me. I might go back to complete darkness." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. Then she signed and spoke simultaneously, a habit she had when she wanted to be very clear. "Do you think I would let that happen?" Harrison felt confused. "What do you mean? What do mean?" Lucy said patiently. "That I'm not going anywhere you can't follow. When I go to college, you'll visit. When I have my own place, you'll come over. When I travel, maybe you'll travel with me sometimes. And even if we're apart, even if I'm across the world, I'll make sure you have what you need." "But how?" Harrison asked. "You can't be in two places at once." Lucy stood up and went inside. She returned a moment later with her sketchbook. She flipped to a recent page and described what Harrison could not see. It was a drawing of a device sleek and technological, combining elements of her candle-based light creation with advanced engineering. "I've been working on this with the Institute's engineers," Lucy explained. "It's a light system that mimics what I do naturally. The patterns, the wavelengths, the intensity variations. We think if we can replicate my light signature, it might trigger your vision even when I'm not there. We're calling it the Lucy light." Harrison was stunned. You've been working on this? For how long? Months, Lucy admitted, since I started thinking about high school and college. I knew you were worried even if you didn't say so. I could feel it, so I decided to solve the problem. Harrison felt tears forming. Lucy, this is incredible. But you shouldn't have to solve this. You shouldn't have to take care of me. I'm the parent. I'm supposed to take care of you. It's not about taking care of you, Lucy said firmly. It's about love. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You protected me, believed in me, let me be who I am. This is just me loving you back the only way I know how. With light. Harrison pulled Lucy into a tight embrace. They stayed that way for a long time, father and daughter in everything but biology, bound by a connection that transcended any conventional relationship. Over the following months, Lucy worked with the Institute's engineering team to develop the Lucy Light prototype. It was a complex device incorporating LED technology with programmable light patterns based on extensive recordings of Lucy's natural light manipulation. The first versions were clunky and ineffective, producing only minimal response in Harrison's visual cortex. But Lucy persisted, refining the patterns, adjusting wavelengths, fine-tuning every variable. Finally, on a Saturday morning in October, she was ready to test the latest version. Harrison sat in the Institute's research lab, electrodes attached to his head to monitor neural activity. Lucy placed the device on the table in front of him. It was small now, no bigger than a bedside lamp, elegant in its simplicity. "Ready?" Lucy asked. "Ready," Harrison confirmed. Lucy activated the device. Light began to emanate from it, pulsing in complex patterns that mimicked Lucy's candlework. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, gradually, Harrison felt the familiar sensation, light entering his consciousness, shapes beginning to form. It was not as strong as when Lucy herself was creating the light, but it was undeniably there. "It works," Harrison whispered. "Lucy, it actually works." The research team erupted in excited chatter, reviewing the neural scan data that confirmed what Harrison reported. Dr. Huang looked like she might cry. Lucy just smiled, satisfied and proud. Over the following weeks, they refined the technology further. They created portable versions that Harrison could carry with him. They developed an app that allowed Lucy to program specific light sequences remotely, sending customized patterns to Harrison's device from anywhere in the world. They integrated the technology with smart home systems, so Harrison's entire environment could support his vision even in Lucy's absence. The Lucy Light was revolutionary, but Harrison and Lucy decided to keep it private. They patented the technology to protect it, but did not commercialize it, at least not yet. This was personal, something between them, and they wanted to make sure any broader application was done thoughtfully and ethically. Perhaps someday it could help others with visual impairments, but for now it was simply their solution to their unique situation. As Lucy entered middle school, new challenges emerged. Adolescence brought social complexities she had not faced before. There were conflicts with friends, academic pressures, and the universal struggles of figuring out identity and belonging. But Lucy navigated these challenges with resilience, supported by Harrison, Claire, Dr. Chen, and the community they had built at the Institute. She also became increasingly interested in understanding her biological family beyond what they knew of her grandmother. On her 12th birthday, Lucy asked Harrison if they could try to find her mother. It was a request Harrison had been dreading, but knew was inevitable. Every adoptive parent's fear was that the biological parent would return and disrupt the life they had built. But this was Lucy's right, Lucy's need, and Harrison would not deny it no matter how much it frightened him. They hired a private investigator who specialized in family reunification. It took 6 months of searching, following leads that often went nowhere, piecing together fragments of information. Finally, they found her. Lucy's mother, whose name was Maria Santos, was living in Houston, Texas. She had been very young when Lucy was born, overwhelmed and unable to care for a child. She had left Lucy with her own mother, Eleanor, intending it to be temporary, but life circumstances had prevented her from returning. She had lost contact with the family over the years, and did not know about Elena's death or Lucy's subsequent journey. The investigator made initial contact. Maria was shocked to learn that Lucy had been found, that she was safe and thriving. She was hesitant about meeting, filled with guilt and shame over her abandonment, but Lucy wanted to meet her, wanted to see the woman who had given birth to her, wanted answers to questions that had haunted her for years. They arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a park in Miami where Maria agreed to fly in for the weekend. Harrison accompanied Lucy, along with Dr. Chen, for emotional support. As they waited on a bench near the park's entrance, Harrison felt Lucy's hand trembling in his. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm scared," Lucy admitted. "What if she doesn't like me? What if I don't like her? What if she wants me to go with her?" Harrison squeezed her hand gently. "No matter what happens today, you're my daughter. You're staying with me. This is just about giving you the chance to know where you came from. Nothing changes between us, Lucy. Nothing." Lucy nodded, visibly comforted. When Maria arrived, Harrison could not see her clearly, even with the Lucy Light device in his pocket, providing background visual support. But he heard her voice, soft and nervous, speaking first in Spanish, then English. "Lucy?" Lucy stood up slowly. "Hi," she said, her own voice barely above a whisper. The conversation that followed was awkward and emotional. Maria apologized repeatedly, explaining circumstances that sounded like reasons but felt like excuses. She talked about being 17 and scared, about Lucy's father abandoning them, about not being able to handle a baby on her own. She cried when Lucy told her about Elena's death, about being alone and lost, about everything that had happened. But as the conversation continued, something became clear to everyone present. Maria was not ready or able to be a mother. Not really. She had her own struggles, her own unresolved trauma. She cared about Lucy in an abstract way, felt guilty for abandoning her, but did not want or have the capacity for an active parental role. She was honest about that, painfully so. By the end of the meeting, they had reached an understanding. Maria would remain a presence in Lucy's life if Lucy wanted, available for occasional contact, willing to answer questions about family history. But she would not disrupt Lucy's life with Harrison. She signed legal documents relinquishing any parental rights, clearing the way for Harrison to formally adopt Lucy if he chose. On the drive home, Lucy was quiet, processing everything. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sad," she said, "but also relieved. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Harrison said. "You got answers. You met her. Now you can move forward without wondering." "She's not my mom," Lucy said firmly. "You're my dad. Not biology dad, but real dad. The one who shows up, who takes care of me, who loves me no matter what. That's you." Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion. "And you're my daughter. Forever." 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. Lucy Reed officially became Harrison's daughter in every legal sense. They celebrated with a small party at the Institute, surrounded by the people who had supported them through their entire journey. Lucy gave a speech, thanking everyone for being part of her family, for seeing her, for helping her find her voice. That night, in the quiet of their penthouse, Lucy gave Harrison a gift. It was a painting, the largest and most detailed she had ever created. She described it to him carefully. It showed 2 figures holding hands in darkness. From one figure, a blind man, pathways of light extended outward, representing the technology and innovation he had brought to the world. From the other figure, a small girl, actual light emanated, illuminating the darkness around both of them. Where their hands met, the light and the pathways intertwined, creating something new, something neither could have made alone. At the bottom of the painting, Lucy had written words that summarized everything they were to each other. Light finds light, and when it does, darkness cannot win. Harrison ran his fingers over the canvas, feeling the texture of paint, imagining what Lucy had created. It was beautiful, not just because of its artistic merit, but because of what it represented, their journey, their connection, their love. As Lucy grew into her teenage years, she continued to amaze everyone around her. She won art competitions. She spoke at conferences about disability rights and alternative communication. She mentored younger children at the Institute with patience and wisdom. She maintained straight A's in school while still making time for friends, hobbies, and the normal teenage experiences Harrison wanted her to have. Harrison, meanwhile, found new purpose in his work. Reed Tech Industries developed new assistive technologies inspired by Lucy's unique perspective. The company created sensory communication devices, light-based therapy systems, and educational tools for children with diverse learning needs. Harrison became an advocate for inclusive design, pushing the tech industry to consider users with disabilities from the beginning of product development, rather than as an afterthought. The Elena Martinez Institute expanded, opening satellite locations in Orlando and Tampa, reaching more families across Florida. The Lucy Light technology, after years of refinement, was finally ready for broader application. Harrison and Lucy decided to offer it through the Institute on a sliding scale basis, ensuring cost would not prevent anyone from benefiting. The device helped dozens of people with various forms of visual impairment, though none experienced the dramatic results Harrison had. His connection with Lucy remained unique, special, their own private miracle. On the 5th anniversary of Lucy officially becoming part of Harrison's family, they returned to the place where it all began. The street corner near the Port District where Lucy had pulled Harrison from danger. It had changed over the years, gentrified like much of Miami, but the essential character remained. They stood there together, remembering that rainy afternoon that had changed both their lives forever. "Do you ever think about how things might have been different?" Lucy asked, "if we hadn't found each other that day?" "All the time," Harrison admitted. "I think I would have been fine, technically, successful, comfortable. But I wouldn't have been happy. I wouldn't have been whole. You gave me that, Lucy. You gave me everything that matters." Lucy leaned against him, this girl who was no longer quite so small but would always be his child. "You gave me everything too," she said. "A home, a name, a future, love. Everything." They stood together as the sun set over Miami, a blind man who could now perceive light because of his daughter's gift, and a once silent child who had found her voice through his love. They had saved each other in ways neither fully understood, bound by a connection that science could measure but never fully explain. Years later, when Lucy graduated from high school at the top of her class with plans to study neuroscience and visual arts at MIT, Harrison sat in the audience listening to her valedictorian speech. She talked about light and darkness, about finding connection in unexpected places, about how the greatest human achievements come not from individual brilliance, but from our willingness to help each other, to share our gifts, to recognize that we all have something unique to offer. And Harrison, sitting in the crowd with the Lucy Light device in his pocket, providing enough vision to perceive the stage and his daughter's silhouette, felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. He had lived in darkness for over 4 decades. Then a child's small hand had pulled him into light, into love, into life. That hand, now preparing to reach out to the world in new ways, would always be connected to his. Distance could not break what they had built. Time could not diminish it. They were family in the deepest sense of the word, bound not by biology but by choice, by love, by the miraculous moment when light found light in the darkness. As Lucy finished her speech and stepped down from the podium, Harrison stood with the other parents to applaud, and in that moment he saw her clearly, the brilliant young woman she had become, luminous with potential and purpose. It lasted only seconds before fading to the familiar blur, but it was enough. It was everything. It was the reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles are not the extraordinary abilities we discover, but the ordinary love we choose to give and receive. Lucy found him after the ceremony, pushing through the crowd of well-wishers to reach his side. "We did it," she said, happiness evident in her voice. "You did it," Harrison corrected gently. "This is your achievement, your moment." "No," Lucy insisted, "we did it. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, it's because you believed in me, because you saw me even when you couldn't see. That's the real miracle, Dad. Not the light, the love." Harrison pulled her close, this extraordinary person who had entered his life as a silent child in need of rescue and had become his greatest teacher, his deepest joy, his truest light. And he understood then what he had perhaps always known, but never fully articulated. Healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it arrives as technological innovation, medical breakthrough, or scientific discovery. But often it comes much simpler, as a small hand reaching out in darkness, as a candle lit in silence, as love offered freely without expectation or condition. Lucy had given Harrison the gift of vision, but that was not what saved him. What saved him was the same thing that saved her: the willingness to connect, the courage to love, the understanding that no one has to face darkness alone. They had found each other on a rainy street in Miami 5 years ago, two lost souls who recognized in each other the potential for wholeness, and, together, they had created light that would shine far beyond themselves, touching lives they would never know, proving that the smallest acts of compassion can illuminate entire worlds.